Hello and welcome back to the virtual classroom. I'm your host, Dr. Olmsted, and welcome back to part 2 of our lecture on wars of religion. Now, as always, take a moment, jot down the rest of the lecture outline, starting with point number 4 there, and make sure you pay attention to those key terms at your left. You ready? Let's get started. Now, we left off talking about, of course, issues in France and Spain and in England. Let's go a little east a little bit here and talk about the 30 Years' War in Germany. Now, it's one of the most important wars of the 17th century, and essentially, this is the war that kind of ends period 1. Now, there's one more war to talk about as far as wars of religion, but this war is important because if you notice the year it ends, it's from 1618 to 1648. And this war is kind of what ends, it ends in 1648, which is the end of period 1 of European history. And so this becomes one of the most important wars. And ultimately what it is, though, it reflects a failure of the Peace of Augsburg. Now remember, in 1555, the Peace of Augsburg had given German princes the right to choose which religion, either Catholicism or Lutheranism, would be their official religion of their states. But this truce had lasted 60 years until factionalism in the Holy Roman Empire would precipitate a cataclysmic war. And basically, the entire Holy Roman Empire was the battleground. Now, in the beginning, it was the Catholics versus Protestants, but it became as much of a political war as a religious war. And by the end, it was the Habsburg power that was the threat. So even though this is a war of religion, ultimately, we're going to see that's going to be start out as a major religious war and transition into a political one. And it's broken down into 4 different phases that we'll talk about. This is why it's such an important war, right? So this has the 30 Years' War has 4 phases. Phase 1 is known as the Bohemian phase. And it begins, of course, in May of 1618, when Ferdinand II of the Holy Roman Empire inherits Bohemia. So he's going to inherit Bohemia, and the Bohemians hate him. And large part because Ferdinand refuses to tolerate Protestants. And in May of 1618, there's what's known as the Defenestration of Prague. Bohemia named a new king by the name of Frederick III, who was a Calvinist, and therefore not recognized by Augsburg. Why? Because remember, Bohemia is now under control, theoretically, of Ferdinand II, Catholic. So it's his decision. But they decided to name a new king, Frederick III, who is a Calvinist. And don't forget also, Calvinism is not recognized by Augsburg. Augsburg only recognized Catholic and Lutheran. And this is a new denomination. And so the Bohemian king, Frederick III, is going to join with an alliance with the Dutch, the French, and the English against the Spanish. And Bavaria will also join a Catholic league as a counter. So Ferdinand II, again, Holy Roman Empire, he is going to borrow an army from Bavaria with support from Spanish relatives and attack Bohemia. Now, ultimately, the Protestant forces will be defeated, and Protestantism will be eliminated from Bohemia. You can see on your screen. Now, Frederick III is going to lose all of his lands of the fighting, but this rebellion in Bohemia is going to inspire other Protestants. This is just stage 1, right? This is only phase 1. And so this is going to be a solid defeat for Protestantism, but it's going to inspire Protestants across the Holy Roman Empire. And then we get to phase 2. And so after the Bohemian phase, Ferdinand II, he kind of grows in his confidence, and he seeks to end all resistance everywhere in the Holy Roman Empire. He wants to crush Protestantism in the northern Holy Roman Empire, in areas that were protected under the Peace of Augsburg. And so he will start to attack the northern Holy Roman Empire. He will find resistance led by Christian IV of Denmark. And Ferdinand II, he's going to hire a very important general. You see him on your right of your screen, Albrecht von Wallenstein. Remember this name, because he's going to appear for the next, 20 minutes or so. And Wallenstein is going to be a skilled general who's going to soundly defeat the Protestants in the north. Oh, that was quick. He wins. And in 1629, there is what's known as the Edict of Restitution that will restore all Catholic lands lost since before the Peace of Augsburg in 1552. It will deprive all Protestants, except Lutherans, of religious and political rights. So theoretically, it was designed to reinstitute parts of the Peace of Augsburg. In other words, Lutheranism is recognized, but all lands are lost. The German princes, however, feared Ferdinand's power because they looked and saw, man, this is a king who's got a holy mission, and he's got a general in Wallenstein, who is formidable, right? He soundly defeated, the Danish king. And thus, in order to pacify the German princes and to reaffirm that he's not going to invade every German prince, every German area, Ferdinand decides to fire Wallenstein in an effort to calm him. But as soon as you fire the general, this is going to lead to a new uprising known as the Swedish phase. Now, in the Swedish phase, the Protestants liberate territory lost in the previous Danish phase. So this is going to be kind of the Empire Strikes Back. And so we have the Swedish phase is the reclaiming of the territory lost by Protestants during the Danish phase. So during this phase, both France and Sweden get involved, hence the term Swedish phase. Both are fearful of the Habsburg powers. This is the transition now. They're fearful of the Habsburgs getting too much control in the Holy Roman Empire. And so Sweden's going to lead the charge and receive financial support from France. And the King of Sweden, Gustav Adolphus, we have a picture of him right there, he is going to invade the Holy Roman Empire in revenge, and seek revenge, and push the Catholic forces back to Bohemia. Again, this is the Empire Strikes Back under Wallenstein. And so the Swedish advance was finally stopped at the Battle of Lutzen when Adolphus was killed. So basically what happens here, short version of this, is Gustavus Adolphus is going to invade in Holy Roman Empire. He's going to be successful, highly successful, and push the Holy Roman Empire, Ferdinand's forces, back to Bohemia. So in response to this, Ferdinand II brings back Albrecht von Wallenstein and uses him as a general once again. And he will successfully stop the Swedish force at the Battle of Lutzen when Adolphus is killed, ostensibly by Wallenstein. But the German princes still feared Ferdinand II. So what does Ferdinand do now? He assassinates Wallenstein. So he hired him, he won. He fires him because German princes feared him. He hires him back to defeat Adolphus. Now, because of fear from German princes, he assassinates him. In response, the Holy Roman Empire will reluctantly annul the Edict of Restitution.
If you have not already picked up your student schedules and badges, please do so at this moment. Come on down to your mailbox and let's pick up these very important documents. Thank you.
And a big thank you for interrupting my lecture. Now, in response to this, the Swedish army will be defeated, but France still now fears a resurgence of Catholicism. And so what happens next? We go to what's called the international phase, also known as the French phase. This phase is brought about where France and Sweden switch roles. In other words, France will be the aggressor and be financed by Sweden. Under Cardinal Richelieu of France, with allies of Protestant forces to defeat the Holy Roman Empire. Richelieu's policies reflect Catholic France's paramount diplomatic concerns as being political, not religious. Again, this is a reflection of politique. And thanks to France's intervention, the Holy Roman Empire will be soundly defeated. Ferdinand II will be defeated. But this phase will, remember, this is all countries are going to now participate, which means This phase is the most destructive. German towns are decimated, agriculture collapses, or famine ensues. Over 8 million people are dead, 1/3 of the population. We went from 21 million people in 1618 down to just 13.5 million in 1648. This causes massive inflation. Trade is crippled. Now, had the Habsburgs won in Germany, France would have been confronted with a more powerful German state on its eastern border, hence why France got involved to begin with. But the result of this, despite catastrophic destruction, is the Treaty of Westphalia, which again, 1648 is what's going to signal a transition from period 1 to period 2. And the Treaty of Westphalia ends the Catholic Reformation in Germany. It's a renewal of the Peace of Augsburg, but did add Calvinism as a politically protected or accepted faith. In effect, it ends the Catholic Reformation in Germany once again, as each German prince is free from any control by the Holy Roman Empire. And it guarantees, however, that Germany will remain politically fragmented and religiously divided for centuries. It also signals or confirms the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. Again, because over 300 German states become sovereign. And it denies the Pope to intervene within the Holy Roman Empire. Think about that. The Holy Roman Empire, the Pope is no longer allowed to intervene. That's a big deal. So what are the results? There's your things. But nobody was happy with this. Protestants feel betrayed because they didn't. It kind of ends the Reformation. Yes, they get private worship, but yeah, the Pope also denounces it. The only merit, it does end the fighting in a war that had become intolerable over 30 years. But over the next few centuries, this war will be blamed for everything that goes wrong with Central Europe. The winners, the German states, they do get independence. England, they get to keep their stuff because everyone else is in Europe's militarily preoccupied. Prussia gets to recognize as a military power. I'm sure that will come back to haunt us. Richelieu, Cardinal Richelieu, because he chose the winning side, he's going to strengthen France, and he himself is going to be a formidable foe in the future. In period 2. Feudalism still exists in Eastern Europe. And technology. We start seeing the advent of new technology, more destructive weapons. Now, ultimately here, let me get my notes here. We will also have the advent of the English Civil War that does fall partly within this time frame. However, we're going to discuss that at a later date during a future lecture. And so we'll come back to that at a different time. So we'll stop there because, again, this is the big wars of religion. So there will be one more known as the English Civil War. But we'll discuss that in much greater detail in the future. So until then, take care and bye-bye.